that song means we are back. And if we are back, that means Inter Miami action is once again around the corner. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Miami Total Football Radio, aka Miami Total Futbol Radio. I am 1/3 of your co-hosting team. If you're new to this podcast, my name is Franco Panizo. Joining me are the traditional two, Jose Armando and Steve Brenner, also known as PS5 Jose and El Primo. Guys, we haven't spoken since late November. We took a bit of a hiatus. I traveled to Europe. My computer also got busted, which is why we couldn't do that last podcast that we promised before we went into the offseason. My computer got damaged because of a humid backpack. Had to take care of that as well. So we've been gone for a bit, but it's good to have you guys back on. Good to hear your voices, which we'll do in a second. So I'll start with you, Steve. How are you doing? How was the break? How was the offseason for you?
I'm very well, mate. Thanks for having us back on, and hello to everyone. I was covering some cricket in the off season in Florida, of all places, in Lauderhill Central Broward Stadium. I think where the strikers were played at one point. Ireland versus USA. USA actually won the first game, which was awesome. Their biggest ever win, and then pretty much the rest of the tour was scrapped because of COVID, which wasn't good. But I have also begun a burgeoning career on a Football Manager 22 just to keep that soccer fix. I'm currently second season leading Ajax to glory, but it's pretty immersive and very I've been channeling my inner Phil Neville for weeks now, and I'm not doing too bad.
So that could go any type of way depending on how people want to interpret that. But Jose, how are you doing? Jose, how are you doing? Happy New Year. I saw you recently celebrated and had a good time. It was your birthday. So how are you doing? How has the start of 2022 come for you?
Well, it's been great. It's been great. It was a great birthday late in December. But I've been waiting for the season, for the MLS season. And I was excited towards the end of the year because I knew, with Christmas and the holidays, the turnaround, it was not going to be like what we're used to, waiting until February for preseason. We're just a few days from preseason. So I'm very excited. Also, the one thing that I'm very happy about is to moving on for a little while from the Miami Dolphins. I'm not very happy. I've been covering them throughout the last 2 months. Well, I've been covering throughout the entire year, but mainly during the last 2 months after the MLS season ended, and I'm not very happy with them sending back home my
your
fellow
compatriot. Yeah, your compatriot,
yes.
Brian Flores, huh?
Brian Flores. So I'm not very happy about that. I'm ready to move on to MLS and Inter Miami.
You're ready to move on to the other football, the better football. Just kidding. The real football, right? I'm not kidding. That's the truth. The real football. That's why we're all here. So for all the listeners out there, if you have not left us a review, we ask you and we implore you. That's all we ask is to leave us a review. Whether it's 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever you think we deserve, please leave us a review. It helps us out tremendously. We are the #1 Inter Miami podcast out there. We are the most listened to podcast. But to continue to grow this podcast and to do a lot of the ideas that we've discussed during this offseason that we want to implement this year to bring you more content, better content, we need those reviews. So if you could just leave us a review, it'll take you literally 10, 15 seconds. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. But switching gears to something Jose touched on, and that's why we're here, is to talk about Inter Miami, which has undergone some significant changes this winter. Probably more than even those on the inside expected, or anyone even on the outside. I did not see this coming. I did not see this much of a roster overhaul. It's been a complete reset. But we're going to dive into all that. We'll talk about Rodolfo Pizarro. We'll talk about Blaise Matuidi's status going forward. He's still on the roster. We'll talk on a lot of different things. Lewis Morgan, the players they've signed, etc., etc., etc. So let's get to it because there is a lot to talk about, I imagine, based off the Q&A session that we have in store for you guys this week. I can imagine it's going to be a jam-packed episode. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get to it. Okay, guys, so normally we start off with the whistle before we begin the show. We've done that for every episode, I believe, since episode 1. But this time we switched it up. We went with the Purge's famous siren, and that's because this offseason for me has been a purge. The team has been pretty much, by and large, wiped clean. A lot of pieces have moved on or will be moving on, and there have been new pieces brought in, but not that many. It's led to a lot of questions. Steve, I want to start with you. I want to hear from you. What's your overall view, before we just dive into the individual cases and the individual moves, what's your overall view right now? Now, we know the transfer window is not over yet. It's not closed. So it's still, you could give Inter Miami an incomplete grade overall because there's still moves to be made. But just from right now, today, January 12th, what is your perspective on the offseason Inter Miami has had?
Listen, it had to be done. We know it did. We've been speaking about that for months, that they had to have a complete squad sort of overhaul, plus with all the financial problems, in terms of the penalties that they had because of the Matuidi transfer. They had to act, and they had to try and get as much off the wage bill as possible. Lewis Morgan was a big one. Nearly $1 million, wasn't it? Pretty much off the wage bill. Gonzalez Perez, Figueroa, all these guys, they had to move them on. But I also don't think that. I think all those players are replaceable. The problem is, are you able to get the adequate quality or get players that are better in, considering the money that they've got to play with? So I think they've done well in sort of moving all those players. The McCoon one, which I guess we'll touch on, was probably the most surprising. But the rest of them, they've cleared the deck. So I think for moving forward for next season, this is now Phil Neville and Chris Henderson's team, and they will live or die by it. But they had to have a clear out because they were left with a lot of dead wood and players. They just needed to move on for one reason or another, which I'm sure we'll get stuck into in a bit.
Jose, what are your thoughts on the state of Inter Miami as of today?
Well, I think they are officially in rebuilding mode. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that it's not part of, an owner's mentality per se, like what we have seen before in other sports here in South Florida. But it's more based on what the situation is for the team in terms of how much in terms of your budget. So and the sanctions, of course. So, I think it comes to be expected both things. First, the moves that have been made by the team, and second, the reaction from the fan base, because as you see players come out and you don't see the quality come back in, then you get frustrated and you start thinking, where are we going? What is this team doing? But I go back to that community event late last year in which we were able to talk to Chris Henderson, and he said, we have a plan. So I guess we kind of have to wait the next couple of weeks. It's not that long anymore to see exactly what the plan is. And the next time we get an opportunity to talk to Chris, it's going to be key for him to answer the question that is, have you been able to execute the plan the way you wanted? Because he had a plan from a long time ago,
right,
in place. And now it's the time to see if he was able to do exactly what he wanted to do. If that's the case, then listen, I guess, it's a good step. But if not, then, frustration is going to start to build.
I mean, I think there's already some frustration from some fans who just want to know what's happening with this roster. Because, like you just mentioned, a lot of quality has left. A lot of starters, regular contributors from 2021, which, granted, and we know, and we've discussed, was not a great team. But a lot of the top-level talent or the regular players in that team are gone. And I haven't seen, and this is just my opinion, I haven't seen, like you mentioned, a lot of starting talent brought in. And I know that they're hamstrung by the Matuidi Gate sanctions. That's obviously a big factor, a big talking point going into this season for Inter Miami. But some of these moves, like you said, they definitely point to this is a rebuilding year. And I'm very curious to see how Inter Miami leadership and brass and Phil Neville, Chris Henderson, Jorge Mas, even David Beckham, if we get a chance to speak to him this preseason, which we have during the past 2 years, I'm very curious to how they sell this to the South Florida public. Because right now, for me, this screams roster rebuild. This is going to take time. I don't think they're going to, as of right now, I don't think they're going to be gunning for a top 3-4 seed like they said last year during around this time in preseason when Jorge Mas said that was the goal, being a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. I don't think that is where the bar will be for this team, for this group, because I just don't see that quality on here. A lot of pieces have moved on. A couple more pieces are expected to be moved on, and the players that have come in are either relatively young or have not been all that productive in MLS or elsewhere. So we're going to see, or haven't even been tested. So we're going to see how things unfold. Again, there's still moves to be made. If I had to give it a grade, it'd be an incomplete. Just still some things to be finalized here before the start of preseason, which is January 17th. That is next Monday. Inter Miami has been holding voluntary workouts over the past couple of weeks. Players that are in market have been going and working out, but official preseason begins next week on Monday, and I do believe we will have an opportunity on that day to speak to some of the protagonists on this team and get an idea of what's the mood, what's the state of Inter Miami heading into the start of preseason ahead of the beginning of the campaign here in 2022. I have to make sure I get my year correct. You know, there's always that overlap from one year to the next where you still think it's the previous year, so I have to make sure I get my 2022 correctly. Let's start with one of the biggest names that moved on this offseason. Now that's Rodolfo Pizarro. We have had contentious debates here, heated debates about Rodolfo Pizarro.
Here we go. The Pizarro fan club still alive.
No, we've got to start with him. Let's start with him, because his move, not only is he a DP, of course, but his move brought about some questions. I reported that I had heard he would not open up a DP slot, even though he was departing on loan to Monterrey. That loan comes with an option to buy, but he is on loan. It's through the rest of the 2022 season. Now, I have been told, and I will jump into it's not legal terms, but the official terms for why the DP slot wasn't open, because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions as to why that is. So this is the information that we have. Pizarro was loaned to Monterrey. Monterrey is covering 100% of his salary, with an option to buy by the end of the year. So that's December 31st of 2022. That opens $612,000 on the budget. Because that's what was counted against the cap, not his $3 million. What was in salary? What was counted against the cap was $612,000. Okay, and the reason why Inter Miami does not get a DP spot is Monterrey would have had to take his full salary and amortization of the transfer fee that Inter Miami paid when it signed him years ago in order to free up the DP spot. And since they did not do that, that would have been in excess of $6.5 million in 2022. Because Monterrey did not do that, they did not pay that portion of the transfer fee, that DP spot does not open up for Inter Miami. So they will only be able to have, as of right now, 2 DPs in 2022. Now, what does all that mean in simpler terms? Well, it means that Inter Miami wasn't able to completely unload or offload Pizarro in a way that would open up the DP slot that he holds. So the ghost of Pizarro will linger in Inter Miami in 2022 in some way, shape, or form, because, again, they will not be able to sign a DP as things stand today. Now, we expected him to leave. We expected the departure, but that obviously is significant because Inter Miami now has one less DP to field and to make a difference on the field. So, Jose, what are your thoughts on that? Let's start with you, because I know you've been a staunch defender of Pizarro over the course of the year. I know there's been moments where you have been critical, but you've been more in favor of him and defended him, as I have in different moments where Steve's been a little bit more critical towards him. But just your overall thoughts of what this means for Inter Miami, that they will not be able to have 3 DPs on the roster this year as things stand.
Well, I don't think that's a big deal, honestly. I mean, last year, there were several weeks in which you were out a designated player. Pipita Higuain was out because he was not fit enough. Blaise was benched because he just couldn't perform at a high level. Even Rodolfo Pizarro, at times, he was not in the starting 11 as well. So, especially in a rebuilding year, when you don't have one designated player, a spot available, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. Now, the one thing that caught my attention with Pizarro is that, he didn't necessarily say goodbye. He said, see you soon. So I'm thinking maybe next year, he wants to go to the World Cup, right?
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. So that's why he's going to Monterrey. He wants to play more. He wants to get back into the national team picture. It's going to be tough, though, for him. But still, that's the only way to try. You have to play. So, I can see a possibility of him coming back next year. Only, of course, if Pipita Guain is no longer with the team. But the reason why throughout last year I was hopeful that Pizarro would end up becoming a key figure for Miami is because he's the only player from the 3 designated players that I can actually see an upside to him. I can basically see Pizarro performing at a higher level this year and the following year, which is the year that the contract with Inter Miami ends. I don't see that happening for Blaise or for Higuain. And so I do believe, this is a good move for both parts, but it's not going to hurt Inter Miami if they don't have, if they only end up with 2 designated players. I honestly don't see it. I think they have to do a lot more. And if that's the case, if he's not available, then bring a young player. And maybe, you're able to develop a young player or not a player into the designated player slot. And maybe he's good enough that he sticks around for next year. So I don't think that's too big a deal.
I would disagree. I would say that it is a big deal because when you're in a rebuilding year, in MLS, first of all, you need to more or less hit on your 3DPs if you have 3DPs to really try to maximize the talent you have and really maximize your chances of being the best team you can be. Especially, I think, in a year like this where you are hamstrung by sanctions, you need your DPs to perform. And obviously, if you have the resources to sign 3DPs, if you're able to do so, I think that helps mitigate or can help mitigate the sanctions if you have 3DPs that perform. Not having one for me is a blow for Inter Miami. Obviously, they would prefer to have a DP slot than to not have it. Obviously, but I think it is a blow. I think it's a bigger blow than you believe. But Steve, Primo, what do you think? Do you think it's a significant blow, or do you think, given the circumstances, given what this year might turn out to be, it's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things?
It was it was like a double blow, really. He just 6 goals and 9 assists in 43 games isn't enough for someone of that player of that quality and the amount of money they spent on him. Now, even though he's gone, they still haven't recouped all the money. So you said, how much is he going to free up? This around $650,000, right?
$612,000
right
on the budget.
And if they would have sold him, how much would that have freed up?
It would have freed up the same amount, but they wouldn't have his salary on the books.
So that's a blow, considering everything we've gone on about the financials, that they couldn't have got all that money, get the money off the wage bill or whatever. But yeah, I was actually speaking to someone the other night who was at the club last year, and we were talking about Pizarro, and he just sort of said, from his perspective, he loved Pizarro. He said he was brilliant in the locker room. He was great around the club. He's a great player. He obviously turned on in training, a lot. We just didn't see it, enough. And of course, we know now that, that him and Higuain just couldn't play in the same team. And if it's going to have to be one to go, then it was going to have to be Pizarro. I think this guy also made the point that Pizarro needs to come in and have a team built around him. Right. I guess they tried to do that in the first season, but it didn't really happen for one reason or another. And then obviously Higuain comes in, a bigger player, bigger ego. We know that they didn't enjoy playing with each other, and that was a problem. So there had to be a full guy, and it was poor old Rodolfo. But shame he didn't work out. But then moving forward, like I say, it's they're still paying for him, aren't they? So it's it's unfortunate.
Right, the salary's still on the books, right? And that see you soon, like Jose mentioned. If Monterrey does not exercise that buy option, Pizarro could, in theory, return to Inter Miami because he'd be under contract in 2023. Now let's.
But after he leads Mexico to the World Cup and then joins Juventus or Barcelona, then it's it's going to be irrelevant anyway.
There's the El Primo wit that obviously we've all been missing. We need more El Primo wit in our lives.
It's no joke. That's seriously going to happen. Honestly, trust me.
It happened in your Football Manager, I imagine. Okay,
could do.
Well, let's touch on the other DP, and I'm gonna go back to you here, Steve, because I know that you've heard some things about Blaise Matuidi and his status with Inter Miami. The Miami Herald reported, Michelle Kaufman, our esteemed colleague, reported that he's likely done with Inter Miami, that he has probably played his last game with the team, that he's likely on the way out. But I know you've heard some things. There's a club interested. What can you share with us? Because as of right now, all I've heard is that he's not in these voluntary trainings. He's not taking part in them. He's working out on his own in his gyms or wherever he is. But what have you heard about the club that is interested in potentially acquiring Blaise Matuidi this year?
Yeah, Troy, the French club have shown interest. They're in Paris, like northern Paris, I think. So, Matuidi's family was certainly from Paris, so that would be handy for him. But there hasn't been anything concrete. But it kind of, if they can try and get some interest in him, which they have got some, then it's possible they could move him on. I think having missed out, still having to pay Bizarro's wages, they can move Matuidi on. I think that would be huge for them. But as of last week, there was no real update on that. But we should hopefully know sooner rather than later about that. But I mean, he wouldn't be able to move to France. He'd be in limbo, wouldn't he? Because obviously, the transfer window's open now, isn't it? So he could go, but that closes at the end of this month. So we'll have to wait and see.
I imagine, and I don't know if you have this information, but I imagine they wouldn't look to acquire him via a permanent transfer unless Inter Miami and Blaise Matuidi mutually agree to part ways, and Blaise Matuidi becomes a free agent, and then he can sign with Troyes on his own. The only other alternative I see is another loan, which we've seen a lot of this offseason from Inter Miami. Do you happen to know which one, or not yet? You haven't found that information out?
No, I'm not sure yet. I'm working on it, but I would have thought that they would want to try and sell him. I mean, but
they're not. Troyes isn't paying. Troyes is. I mean, I can't imagine any club in the world is going to pay for how old is he now? 35, 36-year-old midfielder who's on the downside of his career. I can't imagine that they're going to pay for him. If they're going to acquire him, and this is not information I have, this is just supposition, my speculation on the outside, just trying to put it all into perspective. I imagine I'll reiterate what I just said. They either Inter Miami and Blaise Matuidi mutually agree to rip up his deal, which runs through this year. They mutually agree to part ways. Blaise Matuidi becomes a free agent, and then he's free to sign with Troyes. No transfer fee required. Or if that's not the case, then Inter Miami just loans him out for, I don't know, the 6 months, the year, whatever they're looking to do, and Troyes can acquire him in that manner. I just don't see a transfer fee coming for a midfielder who, over the past 2 years, hasn't shown all that much, who's at a more advanced stage in his career. I don't see that happening. Jose, what do you think about that? What scenario do you think could be more likely? Again, we're just speculating now. This is not information. Part that Steve said was information, but now at this point we're speculating. But what do you think would be better for Inter Miami? Just a clean break, or is just getting him off the roster, off the loan, opening up the budget hit like with Pizarro? Is that just the most important thing at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, listen, I think it's a different situation with Blaise, just because, he's late in his career. He probably wants to go home. And I think if you were to ask him, not necessarily in a press conference, but just having a conversation with him about his time in Inter Miami, I think it started okay. But, as months went by, I think it was a struggle for him, and I think he knows that. And maybe it's, if he wants to continue playing, maybe this is not the league for him. So, I think there could be interest in both sides, Inter Miami and Blaise, to just part ways and move on. The difficult situation that Inter Miami is in is that almost everybody knows that they are in trouble. If you see reports, and we'll talk about, González Pires and Figal later on, but, everybody in Argentina is talking about it, that Inter Miami is in trouble and they want to get rid of this player. So everybody knows that. So the negotiation process it's complicated right now. And so, but in the Blaise Matuidi situation, I think it's an easy outlet. Part ways, move on, and just Blaise continues his career someplace else, and not within the physical Major League Soccer style of play, and maybe he finds a room someplace else, and I think he can do that in France. So that would be great for Inter Miami. There's no doubt about that. Just getting rid of Blaise and having the designated player spot. I think that can be good. Now, don't expect a huge name to come in just because Inter Miami has a designated player spot. Don't come talking to me about Luis Suarez or stuff like that. But
Host is not here for that. Host is not here for some Luis Suarez transfer talk.
Yeah, just expect a player that's in a better situation that's going to come and compete and help out the team.
Okay, so let's switch gears because you touched on, you keep beating me to the punch there, Jose, but let's touch on some of the other players that have moved on. Let's touch on Leandro Gonzalez Pires. Let's touch on Julian Carranza, and let's touch on Nicolas Figal. Now, Figal, as of today, is on the roster. Reports have him linked with a move to Boca Juniors, the famed Argentine club. I expect that will come to pass. LGP goes to River Plate, his boyhood club, the team that he started his professional career with. He's on a 2-year loan with an option to buy. 2-year loan is a lengthy loan. I don't think I've seen one of that length before that's at least been predetermined. Sometimes someone goes on a loan for a year, they do well, the team wants to bring him back, and they bring him back for a second year. But I don't think I've ever seen, I could be mistaken, but I don't think I've ever seen a 2-year loan just off of rip like that. It does include an option to buy, but I don't think we'll see Leandro Gonzalez Pires in an Inter Miami jersey again. But that's just
That's a huge upgrade, by the way. That's a huge upgrade for LGP and for Figal if he ends up with Boca. That's a huge upgrade. Like, honestly, like going from Inter Miami to River Plate and Boca Juniors. I mean, come on, that has to be a dream come true. I mean, it's
right. They're the two biggest clubs in Argentina. The two biggest clubs in Argentina, and two of the biggest in South America, and two of the biggest in the world. Absolutely.
I'm really surprised by that, honestly. And listen, the only way that I see both of those guys coming back, it's just in this scenario in which they don't see the field for a minute during the entire 2022 season. Other than that, I think just for them having the opportunity to get back and, compete at a high level, especially River Plate, I don't know. I think that's an upgrade. I don't know. What do you think, Steve?
No, of course. What, moving from Inter Miami to River Plate? Of course, yeah. So River Plate's one of the biggest, most well-known clubs in the world. I mean, yeah, it's a huge move that he probably was never going to turn down, and he could probably do a decent job there. My knowledge of Argentinian domestic football isn't fantastic, but I'm sure that he, the quality's decent, and I'm just like you say, I just think it's a great move.
So what do you guys think about both of them departing? And we will touch on Christian McCoon, we will touch on Ryan Shawcross, and we'll touch on the center back situation in general. But what do you think about both of them leaving? Because, Steve, we touched on this quite a bit last season, was that we expected one of them to go, but not both. We thought one of the two would go in addition to some other pieces like Julian Carranza, which we'll get to in a second as well. But we didn't think both center backs would go. We thought only one, and that's what we were hearing. But both are apparently going to be on the way out. LGP's already gone. Figal, apparently, it's just a matter of time. What do you think about both of them leaving? What do you think about two more experienced center backs on this team leaving? And obviously, the last season wasn't great. Team didn't make the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. We know all of that. But what do you think about just both of them departing?
Well, I think Gonzalez Pires. We knew he was quite a divisive figure in the locker room. They'd been trying to move him on for a while. Decent player, but again, probably one they've looked at and thought that we can get his financials, off the table for a bit, and then they can look at bringing players. They must have their eyes on different players if they're shipping out. These guys, they're obviously going to have targets. We've seen obviously Mota come in. They had the draft the other day, so they're working through those. But I guess they must think that they're both replaceable, and they got decent earners off the wage bill too.
This to me is a pretty significant, almost a clean break from the previous regime. Almost. I say almost because Gonzalo Higuain and a few of the pieces that were initially signed on by Diego Alonso and by Paul McDonough, they're still in place. They're still around.
Uruguay manager Diego Alonso.
Uruguay national team manager. Apparently, people come to Inter Miami and then they just like use it as a trampoline to something better, no matter what the results are, which is pretty impressive. Maybe, and that might actually speak highly of Inter Miami. And even though the results haven't been great, you know, the stature and the status that it has as a high profile club, not only in MLS but around the world. You know, maybe there's something to that. And we can touch on that or explore that later on in the year. But going back to the center backs, for me, I liked both Nicolas Figal and Leandro Gonzalez Pires as players. They did not. You know, the defense didn't look great. I know a lot of people are like, well, it's fine, get him out of here. We weren't great. It wasn't good. But I thought they were two solid players for the most part. Did they have their mistakes? Did they have their issues? Did they have their lapses and their errors? Yes, just like everybody else on this team. But I think they were two of the more consistent, that doesn't mean they were consistent every game, but two of the more consistent performers last year. And I know LGP gets a lot of criticism for the yellow cards and the accumulations. He had 15 last year, led the league in yellow cards. Obviously, that's something that would have needed to be corrected had he returned, but I think they do lose quite a bit with his departure. More so than they will if Figal goes, which, again, we expect to happen. I think LGP not only knows, you know, he has that MLS know-how, the MLS experience, he also is someone that contributes to the attack, someone that delivered assists or secondary assists this past season and helped generate attacks and attacking sequences and goal scoring sequences with his passing from the back. And not having that, to me, is a blow. And again, I know people will say, well, no, it doesn't matter, the team was bad last year, but Inter Miami was poor in 2021 across the board, but it was weaker in the attack than it was in the defense. The attack was what struggled and sputtered for more of the season and for longer stretches. Gonzalez Pires contributed to the attack as a center back from the back with his passing. There you now lose that. So now that attack now has to find other ways now to create. Attack that was already struggling to create now loses that aspect, loses that weapon in the arsenal. So I do think Gonzalez Pires' absence, yes, there will be positives with his departure, especially if you get a center back that's maybe a little more or a little less temperamental. But I do think that they do lose a bit in terms of just on the field, what he provided, his leadership. I know you've reported that he's been a divisive figure, but I do think that's just my opinion. I do think that they lose a decent amount with his departure. But let's just talk on the overall center back situation right now, because Ryan Shawcross announced his retirement from professional football on Wednesday. Christian Makoun earlier this week was officially traded to Charlotte Charlotte FC, the expansion team that starts this year, and he was traded for the number 1 spot in the allocation order, which, here we go with MLS's complexities, is a player acquisition mechanism that allows you to pick players that are predetermined or that are selected on this list that are either former national team players or that were former MLS players. There's a lot of details in there, but there's a list of certain named players that if they return to MLS, they have to go through this allocation order, and based on where you are in that ranking, you have dips. Now, Inter Miami's at number 1. As soon as you use it once, then you go to the bottom of the order, and the next team comes up to the number 1 spot, and that's my best way of describing this very complex and MLS only thing. I've talked to a lot of people in recent days after the Makoun trade about it, and everyone's always like, only in MLS, only in MLS. Yes, it's very unique. But anyway, those guys are also gone. That leaves, as of today, on the roster, Nicolas Figal. That leaves untested teenager Ian Frey. That proves fairly newcomer Jairo Quinteros, which, Jose, you spoke to, so you can give us some insight there. And yesterday's draft pick, Ryan Saylor. So those are the center backs Inter Miami has on the books right now. I imagine that they will go and sign other center backs. Aimé Mabika, I've heard, is going to sign a first-team deal, so he'll be there as well. But it's not a center back corpse, that has a whole lot of experience, so that is very proven. Jose, what are your thoughts? I'll start with you on the center back situation. Are you optimistic about it? Is it concerning? Do they need to add more pieces? Do they need to add one very experienced piece, or do you think that they can get by with more or less what they have, or as what we know that they have as of today?
Well, I don't think that I can be optimistic, but because of how young most of the players are, and the center back position. I do agree though that you kind of have to sell Figal and LGP, or loan them, or just don't have them on your team, just because right now Inter Miami is selling basically everything that they get an offer for.
Garage sale this way.
Yes, right. So I mean, I think they're in the next few days, once we get there. I wouldn't be surprised if the first day of preseason we see faces that we know who they are, but they haven't signed with the team just yet. So it's part of that plan that Chris Henderson. For some reason, I end up believing too much in this plan. By the way, I'm reflecting on my comments right now. I don't know. For some reason, I'm believing those words from Chris Henderson. Hopefully, he's able to back things up. But I do believe they have a lot of work to do when it comes to defense, especially because last year that was the one thing that they did well for a long time. They play good defense. And with Makoun out of the team, I honestly I think he's a young talent, and I think he's going to do well in MLS. But I don't see it as a big deal, because
Makoun,
the success that he was able, the success came after a lot of work. I'm not going to say he didn't work for success, but the five in the back, the formation was a lot of help for him.
Yes,
having people that when you commit a mistake, you have a teammate or two nearby that can help you out.
Exactly.
That was big for him, and that was part of him having a good year. And I don't know if Inter Miami saw that long term playing with Ford in the back.
Yeah.
So I think it's a move that it's worth it. Take your chance, and we'll see if it works out with the allocation situation. That's the other part of it. That's how people are going to judge that move. So. It's complicated.
Right, but they have to have somebody in mind, right? They have to have someone in mind. If they traded for that number one spot, there's somebody on that list, and we could speculate as to who. I haven't heard any names, but there has to be somebody on that list that they either like or that they know somebody else wants, and that they can potentially flip that allocation spot via trade to somebody else for more allocation money. And now we're getting into all the MLS mumbo jumbo and the different terms and words, and get all confusing. But Inter Miami, I definitely believe they have a plan here. They didn't just get the number one pick just for having its sake. There's definitely something behind this trade. And I will agree with you. I do want to hear Steve's take, but I do agree with you 100%. I believe I said it last year on the podcast. Christian Makoun was the most improved player for Inter Miami in 2021. Make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No qualms. He was the most improved player for Inter Miami in 2021. But I 100% agree that he is a better center back in a 5-man backline than he is in a 4-man backline, because he has more space to cover in a 4-man backline. And anytime I've seen him in situations, or I won't say anytime, but a lot of times that I've seen him in situations, and this is just my analysis, in which he has to cover more space, he struggles. Not necessarily the best with his positioning, doesn't take necessarily the best angles to close down the spaces or close down the attackers, and he does struggle. And I think part of that is what led Inter Miami to making this move. That look, he's got some upside to him. He's blossoming. He's growing in his role with the Venezuelan national team. There's a lot of good things about him, but going forward, do they really see him as someone that can contribute in terms of what their plan is and how they view things going forward? Because again, maybe the 5 at the back isn't something that they want to stick with long term. This is a team that we know from the start has talked about being attack-minded and free-flowing soccer, etc., etc., and you don't normally play 5 at the back. Normally, you don't play 5 at the back if you're trying to instill that. I don't think we will see that this year, given everything we've talked about, but if that's the longer-term plan, then maybe Christian Makoun just didn't fit in. And I know it took a lot of people by surprise. Steve, did it catch you by surprise? And do you think it's a blow, or you think it's manageable for Inter Miami?
No, I mean, listen, I think it's definitely manageable I'm told that they're still paying for one of those salaries, if either Figal or Gonzalez Perez, but they've cleared another one off. So that obviously freed up some money. Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what I'm told. Also, that they're going to announce probably about 4 players this week, and hope to get at least another 2 in. So that's 6 players coming in. Now it just depends on who they bring in. We're not sure the names right now. They're keeping the cards close to their chest, but let's see who comes in. Then we can make a decision on whether or not it was a bad call to let them go initially. But if it's right what I'm being told, that they're going to be very busy in terms of bringing people in this week, then we'll have to see what happens, see who they are.
Okay, well, before we touch on the players that came in, let's quickly touch on the other players that left. Julian Carranza was sent to Philadelphia on loan, and in exchange, Inter Miami got a draft pick, which is kind of weird because if you're sending someone on loan, I don't know why you're being compensated if it's a loan. It's not a trade, right? So if it's being announced as a loan, why did Inter Miami get a pick? That's curious. But all right, he's gone to Philadelphia. Lewis Morgan was traded to the New York Red Bulls for a ton of allocation money. That was one of the biggest and one of the earliest moves Inter Miami made this offseason. Another move was the trade of reserve goalkeeper Dylan Castañeda to Atlanta United for versatile veteran Mo Adams, who happened to be in London I was in my Euro trip, and I was in London. He happened to be in London. We did not cross paths, but I thought that was just an interesting note that he was in the same city abroad that I was in. But of those 3, Steve, which one is the biggest one? I mean, it's not the biggest one, no, because we know Lewis Morgan's the biggest one. But which one of those do you want to talk about? Let's just go. Which one do you want to talk about? Lewis Morgan, Julian Carranza, or the introduction of Mo Adams via the trade of Dylan Castañeda?
Well, you've got to start with the Glasgow Messi. For that, all the joy he gave us in that first season. But I spoke to someone close to him today. They were basically saying that that Lewis was getting upset when people are saying, "Oh, well, your second season wasn't as good as your first," considering the fact that he was pretty much played out of position at fullback for the whole of the season, pretty much. I think that didn't help him last season at all, and I think he would have wanted to stay on for a couple of years. He continue at Miami. He liked it, but. Yeah, it was just a combination of him being a bit unhappy there, I think, of the role in the team, and also the fact that the hierarchy wanted probably to get him off the wage bill, and another guy who they could probably see as they could replace him especially considering if they can get his $1 million back or whatever they got for him in the end. So it's a shame it sort of fizzled out a bit, because you would have hoped that he would have kicked on after that first season. But I think playing out of position as he did, he found it difficult. And he always did okay, but just no end product because his role changed, and that didn't help him. And I think going to Red Bulls is an attractive proposition for a young player, considering their links with Leipzig and in Austria as well, Red Bull Salzburg. So he's buying into that sort of organisation, so to speak. So I think it's a good move for him.
So you said something there, and I just want to clarify. So Inter Miami did not recoup, any transfer fee that they might have paid for him. They got $1.2 million in general allocation money, MLS funny money, as some people refer it as, and that is obviously significant for Inter Miami because they are hamstrung by the Matuidi Gate sanctions, and they've lost allocation money, $2.2 million over the next 2 years. So recovering some of it with this trade, obviously they lose a starter. The one player that's played in every single game, and I believe started in every single game in Inter Miami history to date. They obviously lose someone that's also a fan favorite, but there's a bigger plan here, and that's that they need to manage the roster, manage the situation, and this was a way to do that. I do think he will fit in very well with the New York Red Bulls. His high motor fits with their pressing system and their pressing style. I think he will succeed there, do better than we saw him do here in 2021 in South Florida. I would say this, if there's one criticism to have, and it's, you could apply it to the Julian Carranza move as well. Inter Miami sent these players to Eastern Conference teams. Now, maybe these were the best deals they could get, and nothing else came close. And this is, Chris Henderson was like, all right, well, this is what I can get. I make this move. But, Jose, and I want to hear your thoughts, they could come back to bite Inter Miami in the rear end on the field, right? Or not even just in direct games between Inter Miami and the Red Bulls, for example, or Inter Miami against the Union. If Julian Carranza scores a goal or Lewis Morgan sets up an assist. Not only in that way, just over the course of the season, if those two players contribute to their new team's successes, then obviously helps those teams raise in the standings and could hurt Inter Miami depending on how they're doing. So, I mean, I think that's one small criticism, or I don't know if small, but it's one little criticism I have, or one, I keep saying little, just one criticism I have of these moves. What are your thoughts there?
Well, listen, I don't know, because, I don't know. My expectations of Inter Miami this year are not very high. So, if for some reason Lewis Morgan or Juli Carranza end up scoring against Inter Miami, I don't think that's going to be a big deal. But it
impacts them. But it does impact them, right? It does impact. If they're scoring goals for the Vancouver Whitecaps or Real Salt Lake or Colorado Rapids, it doesn't impact Inter Miami, because the Western Conference doesn't, like, Inter Miami's not competing for a playoff spot in the West. They're competing for a playoff spot in the East. So,
really? I don't know. I'll have to see about that. I don't know. You're very optimistic. Come on. I mean, I think we have to wait and see what Inter Miami is all about this year. Are they really going to be competing for a playoff spot? I don't know. Right now,
right?
If you put a starting 11 with the players that they have, do you think they're going to be competing for a playoff spot?
Six players. They're coming. I'm telling you this week, 6 players are coming. They're on their way. They're in the middle of the airport.
Maybe next
hold
week.
Hold on. Wait, hold on. See, so I do want to have this talk, but I want to save it for the Q&A session, because I think that's what a lot of the Q&A sessions are going to center around. What is this team doing? What is the outlook? Etc. Etc. So I want to hold that thought. And if we're going to just move on from the players that have been traded, I think that covers everybody that's been shipped out or that's departed. Okay, yeah, go for it.
I have one more comment about Juli Carranza. I mean, what a tough sale that must have been. Like, honestly, in your package, when you're trying to sell Juli Carranza to Philly, what's on that package?
They didn't sell him. They just traded, or they loaned him.
Well, still, how do you get Philly to agree to get Juli Carranza?
Well, Philly is a team that, first of all, they were very close to making MLS Cup final this season, and
right.
if not for the COVID, that I don't know if it's an outbreak, but the COVID cases that they had, I guess it was an outbreak because they lost a lot of players right before the Eastern Conference final to New York City FC. They stand a very good chance of making the MLS Cup final and potentially winning it. But they had COVID cases. They lost a lot of significant players. They still managed to take New York City FC to nearly the final minute, extra time looming. It was 1-1, and then New York City FC finds the game-winning goal. And New York City FC, which we haven't mentioned, goes on to win MLS Cup. They become the MLS Cup champions of the 2021 season. It only took them a few seasons as an expansion team to do so, something Inter Miami can look to try to aspire to. But anyway, Philadelphia is a team that, one, is looking for a striker. Now, they take a flyer on Carranza. Obviously, Carranza hasn't overly impressed or hasn't impressed at all over the last 2 years, but they take a flyer on him and they give him a chance. Jim Curtin, Philadelphia Union's head coach, is known for doing a very good job at working with youngsters and tapping into them and getting the most out of those players, squeezing all the juice out of the lime, as we say in Spanish. So I imagine they're just taking a flyer on him, seeing if he can help them resolve some things. If he can contribute some goals up top, great. If not, then they have him on loan for the year, and so be it. But I think it's actually a good fit for the player. I think it's a good fit for just a good flyer attempt for the Union as well. I think it's an overall win-win situation for all parties. But anyway, continue.
No, I do agree. That was my point. I mean, it's hard for him, for Inter Miami to go out there and just have a bunch of teams line up to pick up Carranza. They were able to do so, and I think I agree with you. It works both ways. But it was surprising to me that a good team in Philly was able to pick him up.
They just want to take the flyer. I don't have the stats in front of me right now, but I do. When I looked at the stats, even though they finished well in the Eastern Conference last year, and they obviously were deep into the playoffs, their attack wasn't among the most potent ones in the East. So they're definitely trying to obviously get better this year, and one way is to maybe find a bit more goals from their number 9 position. Steve, let's quickly switch gears to the players that have come in, because we've touched on, I think, everybody else that's left. Federico Higuain retired, as we know. Indiana Vasilev's loan expired. I don't know, Jose or Steve, have you guys heard anything about whether he'll be back or not? Steve might have the pulse on this one, since Indiana Vasilev has connections over there in the UK.
I think Vasilev has gone back to Villa, hasn't he? Is that correct?
I mean, I've been hearing some things that they might be expecting him back, but I don't have that concrete, so take that with a grain of salt for now. I have heard there's a possibility that he does return.
Yeah, and just with Ryan Shawcross, apparently he was told that he wasn't really going to feature too much, next season, and he decided to sort of call it a day, really. So, that was a shame he didn't work out, but injuries sort of destroyed the end of his career, really, which is a shame. He was never the player that he was, but yeah, so that was that situation.
Okay. At the start of the offseason, this was, one of the first bit of news that came out. These were the options that were declined, just so we can be all encompassing and thorough here on this return pod. George Acosta, Ventura Alvarado, Dylan Castañeda, Jay Chapman, Sammy Guediri, Kelvin Leardam, John McCarthy, Josh Penn, Patrick Segrist, and Victor Ulloa all had their options declined. Now, some players were dealt, like in Castañeda's case. Ulloa was re-signed. He will be back in 2022. One of the few loan holdovers that is still here from the opening season, from the very start. He returns for year 3. Brek Shea was also out of contract. He is reportedly expected back with the team. I don't think that's surprising. I think he's versatile and can give you enough as a bench option, occasional spot starter, that he merits that inclusion. So not surprised that either of those return, but everybody else is on. Oh, actually, that's not true. George Acosta, sources told me, is expected to take part in this preseason camp, and there stands a good chance that he makes the team, the first team, and can contend for minutes. So, other than that, everybody else has either moved on or is moving on. Jay Chapman just signed, I believe, earlier today with Dundee United. Kelvin Leardam latched onto the LA Galaxy. I know there's still some players that are trying to figure out their futures. Ventura Alvarado, I believe, went back to Mexico. But there are other players like Sammy Guediri, John McCarthy, and others that are still looking for a new club. They're in the next chapter of their careers. So those are players that have left. Those are a couple of the players that have come in or that are returning, Shea and Ulloa. Other signings, like you mentioned earlier, Steve, Jean Mota was signed, number 8, central midfielder, Brazilian. Will play alongside Gregory, I imagine, in the center of the park. Will take Blaise Matuidi's spot. Other players that came in, Ariel Lassiter was acquired via trade from the Houston Dynamo. He scored 0 goals and had 0 assists. He's a winger. Didn't score and didn't assist in 2021 on any goals, but I think his addition has more to do with speed and stretching the field, and Inter Miami trying to add more just more pace to the squad and more physical traits, just more speed. It's the best way I can put it right now. Inter Miami also.
I think the best thing is, sorry, I was going to say the best thing is Jay Chapman swapping Miami for Dundee. It's going to be absolutely freezing in Dundee. It's not like Miami.
Well, he's Canadian, so he's he'll be, I'm sure, a little bit used to it, or his blood will be okay, I imagine. The other player that was acquired via trade was Bryce Duke of LAFC. So those are the players that came in. And again, it goes back to the question of, are the players being brought in to the level of the players that are being shipped out? And again, this was a bad team in 2021, but there's clearly a discrepancy in quality there. Unless these players come in and completely take the league by storm, I think there's a significant drop-off in talent there. Jose, you touched on it a little bit before. Anything you want to add about the players that have so far been brought in? I know Steve is reporting here on Miami Total Football Radio. 5 to 6 players will be brought on this week, but anything you want to add there, Jose?
Well, I really like the signing of Lassiter. I think, he's a young player. He's one of those guys that, initially I thought he had potential to, move on to a bigger league, and just because of how he was brought into professional football, his family, soccer runs in his family. He was able to go to Costa Rica as well. He has experience with the national team. So I think this could be a very important year for him. I do believe he has the talent to be a starter in MLS, but, it remains to be seen how much help he's able to get and how can he connect with Higuain. As we all know, that is something very important in Inter Miami.
Steve, to close out this very long segment, because we've pretty much just summarized the whole off-season or so far to date, your thoughts on those moves, and as of right now, I know you said there's moves coming, but as of right now, just the level of talent that's been brought in compared to the level of talent that has departed.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like for like in a way when you look at the players that that they've let go. I haven't really seen much of the guys that have come in, so I have to reserve judgment, with that. But I think it's just trying to build the squad up around the edges as best they can, and then having these 4, 5, 6 players come in. You're going to hope, and we haven't really got any names right now. You're just going to hope that they're sort of they're going to be of a decent standing and will sort of fill the voids left by the bigger names that have gone before them. So it's going to be interesting just to see who they bring in and what deals they've been able to strike. But you'd hope definitely 1 or 2 eyebrow raising ones for sure. But we'll have to wait and see.
Well, so 5 of those 6 players, I imagine some of them will be Fort Lauderdale CF players that just haven't signed a first team deal. So I don't know if they will all be foreign-based players or anything of that. Like, we expect Harvey Neville to sign a deal, correct?
Yeah, but I mean, I think they.
I'm Mabika as well. He hasn't signed. As of right now, he has not officially signed a first team deal. So those are 2 players right there that could fall in that 5-6 player category.
The word is they're going to hopefully announce 5-6 players this week. So I took that to meaning just new players coming into the club rather than ones that have already been there. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. I mean, there are some other players from the outside that have been reported. Christopher McVeigh, a right back. Inter Miami absolutely needs to address that right back position because right now they don't have a right back that could line up. If you had to put a projected 11 as of today, I don't know who would play right back. Victor Ulloa, who was a makeshift right back at some point last season, because they don't have one right now. So, they got rid of Leerdam. They traded Lewis Morgan, who was playing right wing back, so right now they don't have one. So Christopher McVeigh is a very tall right back that's been reportedly in conversations with the team. Harvey Neville, we know, plays right back despite playing in center midfield for a lot of the last season with Fort Lauderdale CF. I've also heard Saad Abdul Salam, an MLS veteran, is someone that Inter Miami has their eye on. And someone I did not mention that has to be just touched on. Clement Diop has signed officially for the 2022 season. We reported here first on Miami Total Football that he was on trial with the team last fall, and that's obviously now led to him signing with the team. I think he will be the number 2 goalkeeper. And keep an eye on this. Ojo, Jose, as we say in Spanish. Keep an eye on this. Nick Marsman suffered an injury at the end of 2021 in one of the last games, or the penultimate game, suffered a knee injury. I've heard he's still working out and working his way back from that. I don't have a timetable for his recovery, but I don't see it out of the realm of possibility that maybe Clement Diop starts this season as the goalkeeper, as the number 1, if Nick Marsman is not able to get back to full health by then. So something to keep an eye on, because Clement Diop is now, in my opinion, the number 2 goalkeeper on Inter Miami. But we've touched on a lot of different things. Let's take a quick break. Steve, I know you have to bid us adieu, but we will have you back on again next week as we get back into our rhythm and our flow of things, and as the start of preseason officially commences. So, Steve, Primo, thank you for joining us. Jose, you and I will tackle this very, very healthy and meaty Q&A session. We'll do that after this. Okay, guys, it's time for the first Q&A session of 2022. And Primo has left the building, but PS5 Jose and myself, we are going to answer every single question you have for us or that you guys submitted for this week's episode, because obviously we haven't been on in a bit, and there's been a good bit of time that's passed, and of course a lot of questions from your guys' end. So let's start with a few of them that are similar, and I'll read them all first, and then we can just kind of address them, because again, there are some very similar questions. And we'll start with Mr. Joshua, who says, bluntly, what the hell is Inter Miami doing? The Makoun move makes zero sense. No one on that list is coming to Miami. When he says that list, he's referring to the allocation order. We can touch on some of the names on there, but anyway, that's one question. That's obviously overall in terms of what Inter Miami's doing this offseason. Another one comes from Don Cafecito. Is it a masterclass from Henderson, the way he unloaded players, or did he cut too deep? That's another question again about the overall state of the offseason. Next, another question, Fighting Herons. How would a lineup of Higuain and 10 15-year-olds from the academy fare in MLS this season? Asking for my friend Phil. So, again, another question about the overall state of Inter Miami. Gabe P asked, or he says, and then he asks, I don't understand the Makoun trade. To be honest, is the only decision I'm mad with because I don't know what's happening, but can Henderson fix this? What are we getting back? And will the draft even play a significant part in this team? So that question's a bit more Makoun focused, but it does go back to the overall point that there's been a lot of moves this offseason. So, Jose, how do you answer those questions in the best way possible? I know we touched on it there in the first lengthy segment, but how do you explain this offseason overhaul, this roster revamp, however you want to call it, the Purge, as this episode will be titled? How do you explain what we're seeing?
I would say this. First off, I want to give credit to all the fans that went and took the time to look into the allocation player list. That tells me you're a true Inter Miami fan and you want to understand every single thing that goes around the team. So props to everybody that went in and checked the list.
Like Santa Claus, check it, and they're checking it twice.
Yeah, in terms of Makoun, I think we still have to wait. I mean, we have seen only 50% of the whole deal. I mean, Makoun is now a Charlotte FC player, but we still have to wait who's going to come in. You know, once we see that name and we know for a fact the player that's coming in, then we can judge the trade, I think. So we have to be a little bit patient. You know, it's not exactly the situation that every fan wants to be in. Rebuilding mode is something that you want to stay away from. But, you know, that's the reality of Inter Miami. And this is what happens when you don't know how to deal with designated players in your first season. And so
I don't think they didn't know. I think they knew what they were doing. They just they just skirted the rules.
Just wanted to do it? All right. You said it. And I agree with you. Maybe I should have said it too.
It's got to be direct here, bro. I know we're starting the year. It's the beginning, and we're coming off the holidays, but we gotta call a spade a spade. I think they skirted the rules there. I don't think they made a mistake there. I think they did make a mistake, but they knew what they were doing.
When you don't follow the rules, this is what happens, and you're in rebuilding mode, and you just. I mean, listen. The podcast can be significantly different next week after the 5 or 6 players that are coming in, and we're going to have an opportunity. I'm hopeful thinking that that's going to happen. That we're going to have an opportunity to be there in training next week. If that's the case, the scenario could be very, very different because we might see faces over there that can bring hope to the fans. Right now, they just see a whole bunch of players coming out of the team, players like Makoun with a lot of talent, but they're not going to be there anymore. And so people get frustrated, but just try to be patient a little bit and see what happens in the next few weeks.
And just to flesh out the allocation ranking list and what that means, right? I tried to explain it earlier. This is the actual description on the MLS website, and it says. The allocation ranking list is comprised of players in the following categories. Select U.S. men's national team players, so they're select, not everybody. Select elite U.S. youth national team players, again, select, not everybody, and players transferred outside of MLS garnering a transfer fee of at least $500,000. So I'm not going to go through the entire list. You guys can see it on MLS's website, but some of the names on there, just for example, some of the players that fit that those categories are players like Tyler Adams, Miguel Almiron, Caden Clark, Alfonso Davies, Albert Eslis, Kyle Laren, Gonzalo Piti Martinez, Matt Miazga, Michael Murillo, and Josh Sargent, Jefferson Saborino, and Hector Villalba, DeAndre Yedlin, and Yoshimar Yotun. Those are just some of the names on there. I gave probably more names than I needed to, but that gives you an idea of the type of players that are on there. They're players that have made an impact in MLS or that were sold at a young age for a significant transfer fee. So I imagine, again, Inter Miami has their eyes set on somebody, or that they plan to trade the number one pick for more allocation money, because they clearly are trying to rack up on that given the sanctions that have fallen on them, or that they've been hit with. But going to the overall point, right now I do have concerns about the direction of the team this season. And again, it's incomplete, so let's wait and see. But right now, as things stand, I share the concern of several fans out there that, like you said, this could very well be a rebuilding season. And if it's a rebuilding season, this team may not be all that competitive. And maybe publicly, again, I'm curious to see how they sell it, but maybe publicly they'll say playoffs are the goal. Playoffs are the goal, and we want to, play some of the youngsters and develop them, etc., etc. But if there's not more quality brought onto this team, significant more quality, this team could definitely miss the playoffs again in 2022. But that's my opinion as of today. We'll see what the players are brought in and what they bring to the table. And look, this is another question from across the pond. With all the upheaval of the roster, this ties into exactly what I was just saying. From across the pond, with all the upheaval of the roster, do you think the ownership and management are still expecting a top 3 to 4 seed? He puts that in quotation marks because that's what was said last year by Jorge Mas in the Eastern Conference. Jose, I imagine that your answer will be no based on everything we've said on this podcast.
Well, yeah, the honest answer would be no. But, I have a lot of trouble believing believing Jorge Mas in some of his statements because, he tries to be optimistic. Even though they have a vested interest, right? They're either owners of the team or the front office they work for the team, so they have to sell the image of being optimistic. They're not going to go and say, all right, well, this year is going to be a rebuilding year. We're not going to be any good, because that obviously will then impact how many people turn out, how many people tune in. That impacts the bottom line. So I don't imagine they'll say that. They will try to sell it in a very positive way and spin it in a very positive way. But that does not mean that the way they spin things is the actual reality of the situation or what they really think behind the scenes. Right, but wouldn't you appreciate if Jorge Mas came out and just said it like it is, and explaining that this
but he's
is
not going to do that publicly. He won't do that. Maybe privately. Maybe privately he would. Maybe, but not publicly. He's not. He can't say that publicly. And I wouldn't imagine any owner to say that publicly. Then you're going against your vested interest, which is to make money, right? This is still a business. So if you say, "Hey, we're going to rebuild," that's not something fans want to hear, right?
Yeah,
by and large, right? It's not a sexy thing to hear. That means hey, this year is probably not going to be a very good year. That's pretty much what rebuilding year means, because we're starting over, etc., etc. So I mean, if he said it, I think it would probably catch us a bit by surprise. But he's not going to say it. He's not. I can't imagine he says it. Maybe next week, Jorge Mas is open and honest and pretty transparent from the times we've dealt with him. Not someone that doesn't share a whole lot of words or keeps his cards close to the vest. He does share.
Situation in Maurice. I'm still waiting on those 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
We heard 60 to 90 days twice last year, and obviously this was in the spring of last year, and that didn't get done. So here we are into 2022. still with questions about the stadium, which we will ask, of course, if and when we get to speak to Jorge Mas and the rest of the ownership
I just think
group.
it's very optimistic, and at times, he shows that, he doesn't have a lot of experience managing a soccer team, a football team. So, it's normal, I guess. So I would put a lot of value into what David Beckham has to say. It'll be really interesting to see if, he's available, because he knows exactly what's going on, and he understands the process that the team is going to have to go through.
I'm curious if he speaks this preseason. I have questions if he speaks this preseason. He has done it over the last 2 years, but given the state of things, I could see a scenario where he doesn't, because he hasn't spoken after the seasons, right? He hasn't. That's been a criticism I've had of him and how the team's kind of been run in that aspect, is because he has not spoken after 2 pretty poor seasons. And I fully would expect that if they had a good season, if they made it a deep run into the playoffs, or the team got to MLS Cup, or then won MLS Cup final, or anything like that he would absolutely speak. But from what I've heard, and this is information that I have heard, David Beckham, and this is not anyone that's worked on the inside close to Inter Miami knows this. David Beckham has his own PR people. So David Beckham has his PR people, and those PR people work with Inter Miami's PR people. So David Beckham's PR people obviously very carefully manage David Beckham and his brand. So maybe I could see a scenario again this preseason where they decide not to make him available and he doesn't speak, given the situation. But you know what? I will say I'll be optimistic on this one. I think he will speak, although I do see a scenario where he could not speak. But anyway, jumping back to the questions, because I separated these 2 questions. They're similar, but different enough, and I'm curious to hear your answer. Because this next question comes from Tank721. Will the squad finish last in the league? This new roster is really lacking quality and depth for now. Jose, I know the picture's incomplete. I know it's, the easy answer would be like, we have to wait and see. But right now, is that in the realm of possibility that this team could finish in last place, given what we're seeing? Is that possible?
As it stands right now, yes.
I agree.
Because
I agree with that.
You don't even have a starting 11. But listen, having a young team in MLS doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end up in last place. The one thing that makes MLS different is that it's a physical league, and I was able to speak with Jairo Quinteros just a few days ago, and he was telling me that that's something that you're able to see from just watching the games on TV, and that means that a young guy with having the opportunity to start or to play significant minutes in a team, he might be able to bring something to the table that allows you to compete with some of the other teams. Of course, you're not going to be thinking championship or maybe even playoffs, but you're going to be competing in MLS, even if you have a young team. So I wouldn't be too dramatic to think last place right now, because like you mentioned, we still have to wait and see what the roster is. But as of right now, it's a troubling situation not being able to have a starting 11. But I would say to the fans to remain hopeful, just wait it out a little bit. We're not far away from the start of preseason, and we'll go from there. We'll see if, this team is, where are they going really? Right now, I don't think we have a clear idea, but I think we'll have answers very, very soon.
I agree with almost everything you said there, but for the sake of conversation and just banter here, and I'm being honest, this is not just to say something here on the podcast, as it never is. We try not to do that ever, but right now, based on what I'm seeing, and again, it's incomplete. We will see the moves that are made. We will ask questions to leadership and get some answers, see what their plan is or what they're looking to do this year. But right now, looking at the team, this team is in the realm of possibly finishing in last place in MLS for me. for me, based on just the roster that they have. And look, going back to one of the questions that said, how is this going to work with Gonzalo Higuain and, 10, 15-year-old players from the academy? Obviously, that's said tongue-in-cheek, but I think there is an element to that, because if Gonzalo Higuain was very frustrated and flapping his arms last year when things weren't going well with a team that, yes, it wasn't very good, but there were some decent pieces on there, I mean, his frustration level could exceed that this year if he's playing with a lot of young guys that need to be developed, that need to, they are going to make mistakes, etc., that, just don't have the experience or the seasoning. So, I have concerns. I will wait and see, but right now there are concerns for me as to where this team could finish in 2022. Speaking of Higuain, Elderbar asks, is Gonzalo Higuain the new number 10? Did he tell Phil he was going to be the new 10 and that's why they're bringing in Suarez or whatever old number 9 there is left? Should we lower our expectations so we can have a successful season? Now, I want to tie in another question. It comes from Preki Lives. He says, do you think the rumored interest in Luis Suarez is legit? If so, could he coexist with Gonzalo Higuain? So 2 questions. Luis Suarez is in there. I'll start here, Jose, if that's okay. I do not believe the Luis Suarez rumors for this season are accurate. I don't think they're legit. You're not going to spend that much money on 2 number 9s. I just don't see that happening. On 2 number 9s that I don't see them playing off of one another. They're guys that need the ball and they need the regular touches. I don't think Gonzalo Higuain will be playing the 10 and Suarez the 9. That's just for me. It's out of the realm of possibility. It's something, you're more likely to see in FIFA or Pro Evolution Soccer, which is now eFootball. But yeah, that definitely is not happening. I will, I'll sign that won't happen.
Yeah, but listen, I mean, that's more about rumors and clicks, and I don't see it happening. And the one thing that I would I would think Inter Miami has learned a lesson on is on signing players and having them come halfway through the season. I think especially when you're trying to build a new core of players, that's something that you're going to have to try to stay away. I would believe that Phil wants a team ready to go for the first game of the regular season and have a solid group of players, with all the key elements available in preseason. So I do believe that, there are a couple of situations that could be favorable for Inter Miami this year. And maybe this is going back a little bit to the last question. Remember, this year, US Open Cup is back. Maybe that's a competition that Inter Miami can concentrate on. If you're thinking about, moving far in the tournament and having an opportunity at a title, I think US Open Cup might be the way. We have seen it throughout, almost every single league in the world, how teams struggle at league play, and then in the cup they're able to put a good run of games, win 2 or 3, get one into the penalties, and just being able to move past. And that's how you end up in finals and playing for titles. So there are situations right now within Inter Miami that, yes, bring you a lot of questions, but as well, when you see players like Gregory coming back and Mota signing in the middle, again, Marsman, he was good for most of last year. There are still some key elements that still remain with the team. And so I don't think they need players like Luis Suarez right now. That's the flair of that top European player. I don't think that's exactly what they're looking for right now. They're just trying to move past the trouble that they're going through, and they're going to do it in an intelligent way, thinking about the future as well. The sanctions are not going to last forever, so they have to be ready when the time comes.
Okay, we have a few more questions, and I want to try to go through them really quickly, except maybe for one, but let's just quickly try to go through the rest of these, because I think we can answer them more succinctly or in shorter breaths here. Dosno says, and this ties into this last question, I hope the rumors about Matuidi are true, but what other DP can we bring in that won't be a disappointment? So far, all our DPs have been. So Rafael Veiga was a player that was mentioned earlier in the offseason, and I could see someone like him still coming on board if and when Matuidi goes, because right now, Inter Miami doesn't even have a DP slot available to sign anybody. So Right now, it's not even possible. Until Matuidi is moved off the roster, they won't be able to sign a DP. But if and when they can, I think Vega is a very, very likely candidate. Anybody, any name you want to just throw out there that you would think, hey, this could be a player that could be a good DP for the team, realistically?
Well, I want to touch on the Vega situation because the last thing that I heard about it's that, the price for Vega went up a little bit after the Copa Libertadores. He had a good run there.
And he scored in the final. He scored in the final.
Right. So negotiations, I would have to double check on that. But, of course, the situation, Inter Miami has to figure things out, especially at home first, and then try to find a spot for Vega. But it looks like, they're having a little bit of trouble in the negotiation process right there. But, I think right now, and I mentioned this early on, it's not about DPs for Miami. It's not about bringing the DPs that are going to fix every single thing that's going on with the team. I think you have to start from the ground up, and hopefully they will be able to do that. They have to do it in preseason. That's where it starts.
Next question comes from Jorge Medina. Do you think re-signing Breck Shea was a good idea? Why or why not? Now, that hasn't been officially announced yet. I actually heard that there might have been some issues at the negotiating table that have delayed that from becoming official. But I expect that deal will get done. I mean, that part is my sensation, that I think it will get done. The other part is information that I've heard that there were some hurdles there, or some they didn't see eye to eye on certain things. But anyway, I think, like I said before, I think it's a good addition or a good re-signing, because I think for a year, maybe another season, 2 tops, but definitely for 1 season, he can just be a depth piece that starts on occasion and can provide coverage at a number of positions. Jose.
Yeah, what's the question?
Do you think re-signing Breck Shea was a good idea? Why or why not? They haven't re-signed him yet, but.
Well, listen, I have to be honest. I know everybody loves Breck Shea, but I just don't see it. I don't see it. I do not see it. And we have had this conversation before.
We have. You're not the biggest Breck Shea guy, I know.
Yeah, I remember we had this conversation in the press box, and I remember Michael Frank as well behind us, and he was alarmed when I said that. Nah, I don't know. I don't see it with Breck Shea. Yeah, I would give an opportunity to somebody else, a younger player,
like Noah Allen, for example, the USL player of the year in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's accurate.
I would give an opportunity to a USL player without a doubt, without thinking about it, over Breck Shea. I just don't think he does enough defensively. If you see what he's able to do when he moves forward, I mean, it's okay, but still, it's not enough. So I think he's a little bit of an in-between player, and not exactly what I would expect from Inter Miami, especially this year. When you're trying to patch things, yeah, okay, I can see it, but not when you're trying to build something.
But he provides cover. He provides cover at a number of positions, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons to bring him back, because he can play left back, he can play left wing, and if you absolutely need to, maybe put him at center back. But I think he has some experience. You need some experience. You can't just be a team of all youngsters. But I agree with you. And
center back. Come on, Franco.
You cannot put center back. In an emergency situation with his height, well, they were in an emergency situation last year. I mean, they didn't play him there last year, so maybe not. But left back and left wing, he can cover 2 positions there on the left flank. He's left-footed. He provides some height and has scored off some crosses. So I think he brings enough. And if the numbers are right, then I think it works. And I will correct myself from before. Noah Allen was named the USL Young Player of the Year in 2021. That is a homegrown. He's a South Florida player, teenager, 17 years old, and he is a left back. So one to keep an eye on, if not for this season, definitely for the future if you're an Inter Miami fan. 2 more questions here, and then we wrap this up. And this tweet came with a picture of Pulisic when he attended an Inter Miami game last season. It says, Pulisic to Inter Miami is just about confirmed with that move for the top spot of allocation order, and this picture of him watching a home game confirms that, right? I know Villalba was seen, he's talking about Hector Villalba, was seen posing in Inter Miami gear on Instagram before. Any other players with connection to them who are on the allocation list? So clearly there's intrigue and there's questions as to who they might sign. I haven't heard anything with regards to that. I mean, going for this is just me talking out here now. Like if they were to go for a center back, because I still think they need another body there, Matt Miazga's probably still too young to bring back right now. He probably won't come back to MLS at this point in his career, but that bringing a center back, using that spot for a center back could be something that they do, maybe not. I personally am really, 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 and this is not because I'm Peruvian, although you could say that it is, but I'm a very huge, I don't know if fan's the right word, but I like Yoshimar Yotun's game. Peruvian international, he played for Orlando City. He's a free agent right now. He is on that list of allocation players. He's a very good number 8. Obviously, Inter Miami signed Jean Mota, so I don't think Yotun will come here. But if someone like Orlando City is reported to be after Yotun and you want to flip that to them, then I think you can get a pretty penny for it, because Yotun, I think, is a very quality player still now, even though he's at above 30. He's still very good with the Peruvian national team. A great link between the defense and the attack, and just the way he distributes the ball and moves it. Very technical player. So that's someone that catches my eye. But again, for Inter Miami, I don't know. I don't know if there's any name on there that stood out to you that you're like, hey, they should go after that guy, Jose, or was there at all?
No. Honestly, they have ways to go with the situation and having the first spot in the allocation order. I'm guessing, they're still roaming around and see what's the best decision to be made for Inter Miami, whether they want to trade that or what exactly they want to do, unless, which is also a possibility as well. They already have a player in mind, and maybe they're under negotiations, or sometimes, deals come through, but they're not announced until later on. Maybe that's the case. But as of right now, I think it's only a matter of days until we get into talking reality and who's in and who's out, and what is it for Inter Miami during preseason, and talking about goals and how many minutes X player will get. I know there's anxiety and there's frustration as well from the players that are leaving the team, but I do believe things will turn around quickly in a week or so, and it's going to be completely different. I think next podcast we're going to have a better a glance of what Phil thinks about this roster, and Chris Henderson as well. And maybe we'll get to talk to Phil as well and see what the plan is, just so that we can explain with the knowledge that we have of the players, what exactly is the team looking forward into the 2022 season.
Last question. Roberto Rivadeneira. This is a 2-tweet question. That's why I saved it for last. Since season 1, defense has been our vulnerable position. I wonder if Inter Miami has any strategy to reinforce that position. It seems as if they are only interested in trying to score goals. What good is it to score a goal if the other team has easy access to our goal? You build the team from the defense, then you take care of the rest. Look at Nashville; they are a defensive team and has been a successful strategy. Anything you want to add there, Jose? Anything you want to say there to address that final question?
Well,
yeah, I don't agree. I don't agree that the defense has been the most vulnerable part of this team. I disagree with that. I agree that you want to build from the back to front. That's just, in soccer terms, and just, how a lot of people view the game. A lot of people think that you start building from the back to the front and through the spine, which, again, goes center backs, center midfielders, and striker, maybe an attacking midfielder if you play with a 10. So that's normally how people want to construct a team. But that's not how MLS does it, right? MLS, because they want to...
I don't think that's the case in MLS.
Right.
I don't think that's the case in MLS. In MLS, everybody goes for the striker.
Correct. It's the other way around. It's the other way around in MLS, because MLS wants to sell goals and wants to sell action and wants to say, look, our soccer is exciting, because maybe the average American that sees a 0-0 game or a 1-0 game with very little goals doesn't think that's exciting. So it's the biggest reason why there's a DP rule and why almost every single team in the league and over the history of the team, the 95+% of DPs have come in attacking positions, because you don't normally see DPs at center backs or goalkeepers. There are exceptions here or there, but not often.
MLS likes the Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Carlos Vela, El Tráfico 5-4. That's what MLS likes.
I mean, hey, who doesn't like a good 5-4, man? Who doesn't like a good 5-4? But it's clear that MLS...
I don't know.
I like a good 5-4 occasionally. No?
Maybe I'm old school. I don't know, but I like to see good defense at times.
Oh, of course. I didn't say I don't want to see a 5-4 game every weekend, but once in a while you see a 5-4, you see a game that just breaks loose and tactics go out the window and there's just a lot of goals. It's fun. It can be entertaining, but again, once in a while. If games were like that every week, then
maybe once or twice a year, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's fine. I can agree to that.
The Tráfico with Zlatan and Carlos Vela was like every single time 5-4, 3-2. Come on. But yeah, that's the way it goes in MLS. Most of the teams they put their money into scoring goals, and so that's the one thing that I wouldn't agree with. And I mean, I would love it if Inter Miami was the team to change things around. We have seen it in other leagues, like, the NBA is not what it used to be. Now it's the raining 3-pointers every single game. It's boring. 157 points every night. It's crazy. But, if Inter Miami is able to turn things around and play some good defense and some other teams try to do so, or maybe find a balance at least, then that'll be great. I'll go for that.
Yeah, so I would say to answer the question more specifically, because we went on a little side tangent there, is that, again, I agree with the idea of building a team from back to front, although that's not how MLS does things, so MLS builds from front to back. It's just how it is in MLS, and you can criticize it or not, however your viewpoint is. But I do agree that Inter Miami needs to improve the defense. I will reiterate. I do not think the defense has been the most vulnerable line on this team. I think the midfield has been very, very poor with its inability to not only keep the ball, which also helps you defend and not have to be under constant pressure all the time and always having to put out fires, which, again, it's all of it. It's a total thing. But the midfield has been weak. Up top hasn't been great either. We talked a lot about the goal scoring woes in 2021. So for me, the defense, and this might be shocking for a lot of people to hear, but I think the defense might be the strongest line on this team, or has been the strongest line on this team for the first 2 years and change. And obviously, defense hasn't been all that great. So that just kind of tells you the story of how things have gone during these opening 2 years. That does it for a very meaty and healthy Q&A session. And, we want, I know it's been long, and this has been a long pod. This is probably going to break the Miami Total Football Radio record for longest pod ever, but we wanted to answer every single question and do so as thoroughly as we can, as we always do, because we obviously have been gone for a long time, and you guys have a lot of questions, and you guys obviously chimed in and gave us the questions, which we appreciate. So thank you guys. We will not take another hiatus like that. We will be back again next week. Jose, any final thoughts? It's been a long pod. We've said a lot of things, talked about almost everything. Anything you want to add before we put a bow on this show and move on to the start of preseason next week?
Well, no, I mean, I think we said it all. It's been a lot of fun, but I just want to go back to, the understanding of the situation that the team is on right now. There are restrictions, there are sanctions, and you have to push through them, and it's not an easy process. So, as a fan, you have to be patient right now, and there's still a lot of talent, and with the one player that I think has an opportunity, it's Edison Ascona, again, one of my favorite players in Inter Miami. He's a guy that might end up having an opportunity this year, and he's one guy that can change things up. And he's the prime example. That's why I'm mentioning him right now, because there are several names right now in the roster that maybe you don't know about. You don't even have a reason to bring your hopes up, but maybe they have the talent. So remain hopeful. wait what preseason brings, and then make a decision whether the moves were right or wrong. And in terms of what Chris Anderson and Phil Neville have been able to do so far.
My final thought is that I'm happy we're back. That, you know, it's not going to be an Inter Miami focused thing. I'm happy that we're back and that we're doing this again. We obviously, I think we all needed to recharge the batteries a bit after last season, and I did so by going to Europe for a month. I bounced around a whole bunch of different countries that I've never been to, which was an awesome experience. And I'm really looking forward to diving headfirst into this year with the same type of coverage that we've provided over the first 2 seasons of Inter Miami's existence. And we have a lot of plans in store for you on this podcast. I won't share it, leave it a little bit as a mystery for now, but we have a lot of plans for you. Don't worry, the shows won't be this long every week. I don't expect it to be this long ever again, but again, we have a lot of neat things in the plans. I can't wait to share them with you guys. So that is my final thought. We will leave it there. We will return next week once preseason for Inter Miami in 2022 has officially begun, and we will dive into all that's said and everything that's not said and all the moves that are to come in that pod as well. Thank you guys again so much for listening. If you're new to the pod and you've made it all the way to this point, please give us a follow on all our social media channels, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. Miami Total Futbol, of course, and please, I started the pod by saying this, I will end the pod by saying this, please leave us a review. Be honest or be as expansive or as short, as brief as you want, but please leave us a review. It will help us out tremendously to execute some of the plans that we have in place. So, for Jose Armando, for Steve Brenner, I am Franco Panizo. This is Miami Total Football Radio, the #1 podcast and most listened to on Inter Miami. And we'll talk to you guys again very